Good, good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. Welcome to our panel Beyond Reach and Frequency to get in a fast lane to RX. The commercialization process in our industry has been very much dominated around a reach and frequency strategy, which when you think about it is really more of an efficiency play than an effectiveness play. So this was initially driven by reps, and now it's extended to digital channels, you know, how many emails, how many media impressions, web visits, and other digital channels are being added to this reach and frequency framework. Now, leading organizations in the industry are really starting to revisit this approach. They want to look at analytics across channels and content as well, and see how they can drive a more effective customer journey to actually not just be efficient in a promotion, but to be more effective in terms of determining what's the fastest way to get to an RX, because that combines a great customer experience with better commercial success through faster sales uptake, and efficiency is already built into that approach. To discuss this very important shift in our industry, I'm joined by a distinguished panel. Jeff French, he's VP and CDO at Viv Health. Aaron Foster, VP of Customer Analytics and Insights from Pfizer. And Thomas Thestrup from, is a corporate VP of Novo Nordisk. Welcome, gentlemen. So let's start off with a question for Aaron. Aaron, as the organization started to realize that this reach and frequency approach may not be necessarily the model for the future, what are some of the realizations that led you there? And what are some of the things that you've personally seen and learned that showed you that there's a need for a different approach to customer engagement?
Thank you for the question, Mark. And I'll say we realized that reach and frequency is not necessarily the model for the future through a number of different ways. Probably the first, and it's hard to beat in terms of evidence, is experimentation. So the experimentation within your commercial model is critical. And we've seen that when we've changed the mode of just looking at reach and frequency, but actually supplementing the customer experience with other channels and other connected channels and experience, that HCPs value that experience, and you also maintain your business. But you're also looking at, of course, those metrics and how do they change. And through that, what we saw in those experiments, and one in particular I could say most recently, is that overall reach and frequency throughout our whole ecosystem of metrics, it did decrease. But your other metrics of engagement, that those increased in cases and changed in cases, and overall it created a benefit. And in one aspect, we were looking, can we maintain our business, even with a lower overall level of reach and frequency, but by creating a better experience for our customers, actually not have an impact, a negative impact to our business. So for example, some of the things that we would see, or we saw, you take a commercial rep who normally would engage a customer with a message, and then that might be it through that channel. But they look to triage customers to medical when there was the right and appropriate circumstance to actually triage that customer to medical. And so what we would see, and overall, because of the model we were using, that overall engagement, again, that reach and frequency metric decreased, but in those triage situations, that the customer was getting the information they want, the experience was improving for the customer, and it was actually beneficial overall to the business and to what the customer needs were to being addressed. So again, an overall decrease in terms of reach and frequency when this triage model was deployed, but an overall customer impact and benefit. So it suggests a perspective that the mix and that experience are more important overall than the volume. And it's critical to identify those experiences that are going to have that positive impact on the customer experience, on the insights and information that they need, and measure those things as well to overall measure how is your model performing and succeeding. And then I'll also say it's a challenging area, of course, to do research overall. What we'll see and what I've seen almost for all the research is that when you look at preferences, there's either a majority of HCPs that will prefer a certain channel, or even a significant minority that might prefer a particular channel. But the takeaway is that HCPs are seeking to engage across several preferred channels, modes of engagement with subject matter expertise, as well as commercials rep, as well as the ability to learn on their own, as well as the ability to engage when it's convenient for them, depending on their day, depending on the time or what they need. So this move from traditional and the move from metrics that are traditional are just key and critical in this shift to interpretation. So with that said, I mean, reach and frequency is there and important to measure an engagement, but it's that those types of engagements which you're measuring that are overall building to a measurement of your overall customer experience, and that you're impacting that mostly at the end. Hope that's
Wow. It's a lot of energy going in this direction with, and by the way, I want to invite the other panel members to comment as well, not just on the question that we have prepared for you, but let the discussion flow as you feel inspired. Thank you, Aaron. And Jeff, to follow up on this, so this shift is really happening. Do you think there are some fundamental things that we have to change to make this shift from the traditional reach and frequency approach to this? What do you see?
Well, probably to build kind of on Aaron was just saying a minute ago, when we talk about measurement, I probably say like in any major shift of your business, there's kind of two key factors which really drive it. The first one being that leadership mindset and the understanding where that measurement really comes into play. And the second is culture and how you affect the culture of the business to start looking towards these things. On the former, as you think about leadership mindset, and to Aaron's point, it's different right now, because if you think what's happened in our industry over time, most of the leaders in our industry at this stage have come up, commercial leaders, mind you, have come up through the sales capabilities, where reach and frequency were the things that drove their day-to-day performance. So it's one of those where, how do you inform that what Aaron was just describing about the collective engagement of your organization is actually now what's driving value, right? And that's an interesting one. It's not easy, because the reality is you got to prove it, and the way to prove it at a leadership level is to prove it through those measures. So you really need to start kind of evolving the measurement process, learn and educate the senior leaders on, as you progress, your in the case of marketing, your funnel to get people through the customer journeys and start understanding conversion rates and what's actually affecting those shifts in your different stages is really, really important. And to Aaron's point, it's not just about calling on them; it's about the combination of the various touch points that are really collectively asking somebody or helping somebody to understand, how is this going to help? How is this particular product going to help my patient portfolio, right? And if you're able to get there, you're able to get that over that line, then it's clear, what is actually shifting the needle. So getting those measures in place is absolutely critical. The second biggest piece of that is around those types of measures, not just conversion, but having that qualitative factor starting to get baked into all this. What do you mean by good experience? There's a huge, debate on what that is. It's historically quite subjective. Unfortunately, I think many of the pharma organizations have started off on the wrong foot a long time ago through things like broad level NPS scores and trying to, get people to, say what they think about, where that organization sits as it relates to their relationship. Well, the interesting bit is with this, what was mentioned in the keynote, the amount of data that's now out there, our ability to collect that information much more surgically to really understand for that individual physician, are we really helping them with their patients? And are we showing up in a way that's valuable to them in relation to that? And it's those customer experience measures, those much more acute, focused measurement capabilities that are now available, like through customer experience quotient scores and how you build that up through the various touch points over time, that really are changing the game about how leaders think, yes, this is actually doing something. It's actually moving the needle in the business. And if that's done right, then you hit the second big thing, which is that then filters down into the organization. That then changes the culture. That then tells everybody it's not just about, going out in volume. It is about actually making a difference, making people feel differently about you as an organization, but more importantly, you and your the products that you and services that you provide. So, and it's the combination of those factors of getting to common measures, getting to that customer experience, getting leadership bought in, that then changes the culture.
So Jeff, if I ask a follow-up question to that, when you think about reach and frequency, it's really a very simple measure that's categorize or summarizes what's happening at the individual customer and channel level, but then summarizes it kind of to leadership to very easily digest, right? Are we on track in our promotional effort or not? Do you see something similar when it comes to not just customer experience, but more this kind of engagement-driven model? Basically, is there a simpler way to report to senior management we're engaging our customers the right way? Maybe it's a question to all three of you to see, because that is also the disconnect, right? I mean, a VP or a C-suite level person can't go get into the minutia of the engagement metrics. Maybe we're missing that summary metric at this point. Any thoughts around that?
Let me start, and maybe somebody else can add, which is simply put, you got to kind of measure where the leadership group is, understand, and you can't overcomplicate things. You got to start with something that's simple that everybody kind of gets their arms around. And I've seen scenarios where you just start with something which proxies experience, like fundamental click-through rates. Is what we're actually sending on that email actually adding value because they're clicking on it and actually getting to that download and they're downloading it. Something that simple to start that process. And then that allows you to expand from there and starts you to figure out what are those kind of common single, customer experience, roll-up scores that you can start to pull together for leadership. But you got to take them on that journey on how to build there.
Yeah, and I can add to this. So very simply, when the doors closed a year ago, 1.5 years ago, and we figured out we don't have our consents in order, then we suddenly become very interested in monitoring that, right? Then some simple targets really drove change, and also kind of opened our eyes in terms of, if our traditional 99% focused channel is not working anymore because we can't, even though we still believe in it working, but the doors are simply closing. How do we then engage? So a simple metric like that was really powerful, also necessary, because we did not focus enough on it. Again, I should be saying, speaking, mainly from a non-European, not non-US, but European perspective. So that was a clear example of a simple metric we needed to look at. And then now I have the word. I might as well continue, Mark, if it's okay with you. Yeah. So the barriers to driving a look beyond reach and frequency. I think I'm not in any way trying to throw reach and frequency under the bus and say we should never talk about that, but I am trying to evolve it. So what do we mean with reach? And is it even relevant to talk frequency anymore, or should it be sequence, right? So what and the barriers, there are many, but with the risk of sounding like a broken record, right? It's really the 3 Ps. It's the platform, it's the processes, and it's the people. And the expensive but also easiest part, the platform, you got to get your data straight. Because we can do everything in terms of reach and frequency, and we got that down with our CRM systems, etc. But when you broaden the channels, you need to make them connected. And that's not just something you just turn on, certainly outside of US where you don't have the data discrepancy. So you need to get that in order. And then the processes, again, it's not a pure push model anymore. It's also a pull where we need to have a more stronger focus on the journey instead of on the pure push metrics of rep calls. And then the people, that's definitely the most difficult part, changing the minds, as Jeff was alluding to, but really building capability, right? Capability in the marketing, the sales, and the medical organizations. And we're undergoing that. It's a fun journey. It's also difficult at times, but we really got some good momentum in it. So again, COVID really helped us to see things differently and become aware that there's another way, possibly better for the customer, possibly better for the company, but bringing about a lot of change, and some find it difficult.
I agree with everything Jeff and Thomas just said, especially that emphasis on changing the mindset. Maybe just a quick sort of ad that I've seen that has helped with that mindset is, and it's been a partnership from an analytics perspective, but is going through a real customer experience mindset shift with senior management, taking through that customer experience. What are our customer objectives? And then it helps us say, okay, now that we've established those customer objectives and that experience that we want to create, then what's the metrics that are around those objectives? And that sort of gives you something to lead with that change or shift of metrics, because you've defined the customer experience objectives in a different way. So just it's one way in which we're trying. But to Jeff's earlier point too, you start small, but you start small with that. How are you changing that customer experience? What are you looking at as those objectives?
And Mark, you invited us to just jump in, so I'm just going to do that. It's more
please,
fun.
That's what we're looking
So
forward
Aaron mentioned in this opening, and I really like that. And again, I'm going to advertise a little bit for the presentation I'm going to do afterwards. Our goal, reach and frequency is because also what drives share of voice, and share of voice is still the holy grail for us because it's been working, right? So we really need to think hard before we just throw that one on the bus. But my point is looking at share of engagement in a larger scope. So it's not just about how many reps do you add into a channel to drive a share of voice. It's what channels and what content do you use to create the experiences Aaron talks about, and that engagement share with the customer, and how you then track that, right? It's not about who yells the loudest anymore. That doesn't work digitally. So it's about having a more holistic picture of that. You still need it. You still need to push, but do it smartly. That would bring.
Maybe we'll call it a quality share of voice versus share of noise, which we used to call back in the day as well, right? And juxtapose the two. Do you think that and I'm stealing an analogy from another colleague here, that the pressure that was created by COVID-19 to evolve this model, is that pressure stronger than the gravity of business as usual and to try and trust it? Clearly, or is there still some tension between the two, and we're not sure if we're sliding back? Is that battle won or still ongoing?
It's ongoing from my perspective, and again, it depends on what kind of burning platform you stand on. Ours is not terribly burning, but it's opened eyes in terms of working differently. We see that all of us, right? All of us have experienced it. We've opened our eyes in terms of there's a different way. Maybe we can actually turn this into something good. So that clearly is there.
I'd say I think the tide has turned, but recognize that a global business to move every market in that same direction is a big mindset shift, is a big extra shift. But if you to use an expression to say which way the wind is blowing, yes, it is there, but it's a massive ship to turn.
And if I can add one additional element, Mark, I think the other bit to this, we're all in global enterprise businesses, right? And the reality is everybody is in a different place about how they're managing that tension. Different countries are taking different approaches, and it's important to listen right now because we're in that ongoing element to figure out what actually works for our customers, because it's not necessarily where we are, it's where they are, and that's what we have to listen to. And you'll see, just looking at data, looking at the way different countries are opening up at different times, the way they've adjusted how they're even seeing their patients at the moment, it's different everywhere, and across therapy areas and countries. So it's a bit of a matrix minefield for those folks who have to manage all that. But it's actually quite interesting because you're learning a lot at the moment. Probably more than there's more data around this than we've ever seen. And so now it's about how you collectively pull it together and really make sense out of it and create a direction that's clear for everyone to start with.
This is really good. And gentlemen, you okay? I know you're experts enough that I can shift the question a little bit around based on a conversation flow. So Jeff, to follow up on that, so if every company is in a different place, every market within a completely different place, how do you drive, what strategy you have to drive an adoption for this kind of customer experience-based marketing or metrics across the organization? Like what do you see? And I really like that we are bringing solutions here to this panel and not just highlighting the problem. And I know you have some experience. So what are your thoughts around that? How do you drive that adoption?
I'm going to touch on what was mentioned a few minutes ago, and the reality about having a common framework across the organization which to build upon, but not be so rigid that the framework doesn't provide agility by market to shift. right? So what do I mean by that? So I think there's even some questions I'm seeing in the chat, which are around customer journey development and really clearly understanding, and I think Aaron said earlier, understanding what you're trying to achieve for your customer journeys, first and foremost, getting a common understanding of that, but also handing that over to the markets to say, here's what we would like to see, here's where we think the organization is, but we recognize clearly your customers may be slightly different than that. So therefore, where do you draw that line that permits that local agility for engaging at a completely different level through different channels, through different content, through, and basically really fundamentally giving the empowerment over, okay, which I know our industry struggles with from time to time, to the markets to really drive that through. And because I think that's where the key is. The closer you get to the customer, the more agility you have to create. But it has to come back. It has to be measurable, right? It has to be, as an organization, we desire as leaders understanding what's working and what's not on a collective state. But so therefore, you have to have a common framework to do that. And to me, customer experience frameworks are the way in which that's provided.
Great, very practical approach. So, one common thread that I hear in this conversation is the data and analytics aspect, right? So a shift here is also a shift in evolving our industry to be more of a data-driven industry. So, Aaron, let me ask you a question around this. How do you build or maybe evolve the data and analytics engine to be able to take actions at individual customer channel level and kind of drive these journeys? Is it just evolving what we have, or is it rethinking how we do and set up and execute a data and analytics approach?
I do think it's actually evolving and changing how you set up and set up the data as well as the analytics. So that underlying data, and then the underlying data part, I'll admit, is not often the attractive part of that analytics change, but it's foundational to everything that you will need to do. And when you're moving this mindset away from the primary single channel of rep, reach, and frequency, move into a perspective of experience and measuring around those experience in an omni-channel sense, you're gonna have a foundational change to how you collect your data. You're gonna have that connections to your marketing technology stack. You're gonna have that external information that's also brought in, traditional and both non-traditional. You're going to be collecting information that potentially comes through voice or chat or those aspects. And how are you processing that information? The foundation is going to start with that collection, and you have to build around your new model. The old traditional one we have found does not work. It does not support the analytics and insights that we need to move forward. You also have to conform that data that you collect. Now you have that unique physician who's engaging with you in an ecosystem of touch points. Some of them you own, some of them you don't own, but that master data around it to understand what is that physician's experience, you need to encompass all of those different touch points. And if you do that, and you're starting to capture aspects of it, they saw a video. What video was it? How much of it did they see? What is the overall metadata that you're using to be able to associate that information? But if you do that right, then you end up with something that's truly beautiful, and that is you understand that customer record is not only who they are, but all the instances of engagement with you and to external as possible with the rich information around those engagements. And then you can start to say, when a customer, when a healthcare provider has this experience, this is how they respond. And then this is how we need to evolve that experience. And that's where the analytics starts to be powerful. And again, it's, 2/3 of your time is often spent on the foundational and the investment to get that strong 360-degree view and truly experiential view of your healthcare provider. But that enables a lot of powerful analytics, not only your usual just data representation of what they're doing, but brings you start to advance analytics, AI, and machine learning, where you start to make predictions and then feed that back into your ecosystem to take real-time actions. Those are the aspects that you need to get there, but don't ignore the foundation and the investment in that foundation.
And if I can add, of course, I get goosebumps when Aaron sits and talks about this stuff. I like it too, but the rest of the organization needs to follow, right? And that is really, I mean, yeah, we got it all going, and then, you know, if we are not able, we or the great organization are not able to build that capability to really translate that into simple actions, we're not pulling it through. And again, I really foresee that the commercial excellence functions, which also is mine, of the future, they need to do different things. I mean, one thing is provide the analytics that Anna is talking about, but also help building that capability out to the local execution layer on how to interpret those data and turn it into simple actions. Otherwise, we're not flying. So that's really our key focus as well, to figure out how we do this. Once we start connecting the plugs, that's great, and then we need to take that further on.
If I can build on that just real quick, because I think you hit some really interesting, Thomas, is the fact that not only you have to do that, you have to do that in a collective way, right? Because as a group, it's imperative to kind of learn it, you know, collectively about what that data is telling you. Because I've seen situations, kind of some watchouts perhaps, where, you know, you bring in a data analytics insight capability to, you know, do exactly what you just described, but it's kind of sitting over there. And you got an organization that kind of sits and points at that person and says, well, that person is going to tell me what I need to be doing. And that's where things start to fall over, right? Because that might be a starting point, but how do you really integrate that individual into your day-to-day decision-making around what you need to be doing next, what you need to be planning for next? That is where it starts to work. And the things around, you know, finding the value in the different engagement types per channel, the different content utilization that you have across the organization, having that individual be part of those discussions, not just somebody who's feeding into it and dumping data down and walking away, but really be part of that decision making is absolutely essential.
Because if we don't do that, Jeff, you're absolutely right. If you don't do that, then all of us are not really adding any value, right? Then we're just creating more data that can't really be used or transformed into value. And that's, I think, something like us who's preaching to the choir here, we need to remember. So that's at least top of my mind, saying, okay, that's all great, I love it, and then what, right? That's going to be tough.
Absolutely agree with Jeff and Thomas's points there. You can't have data and analytics sitting over to the side. What we actually found is part of this is that you needed to embed advanced analytics and data analytics within those aspects that were then going to leverage it. And that included both commercial, that included medical, because you were creating this experience that was fully and wholly. And that meant that places where we didn't have analytics embedded, we needed to move towards it. It just has to be inextricably linked. Otherwise, you're not following through with actions. You're just collecting data, to Thomas's point.
This is, you know, if I summarize some high-level takeaways from this discussion for the audience, that we still have more time, but I mean, obviously we have a panel here of individuals that work in organizations that are forward-thinking in this area. So this shift is underway. For colleagues who are listening in, who are in organizations that have not made that shift yet, you want to think about is, what is your competitive position going to be if leading organizations get that quality share of voice and your organization is just focusing on share of noise. The other part is what I heard from the last few comments is there's going to be a shift in how what the role of the functions in the organization between commercial operation and the marketing teams, but also shift in how they're going to collaborate with each other at local and at global level. So and how we're going to work differently. I know there's a later panel on agile, which will play a role in that, obviously, as well. So I think very important for us and very real, not just as a macro shift, but these things are going to affect us as an individual working in commercial operations, whether it's analytics or content or just marketing and brand teams. So I think very important. I'm going to switch a little bit back and forth between some audience questions here as they're relevant fit in here. There's a question around non-traditional data sources to generate meaningful customer insights. I wonder, I don't know, maybe Aaron or actually any of you, any thoughts around the non-traditional data sources and what are they? How are they leveraged?
Sure. So maybe I'll start quickly, and of course, welcome Jeff, Thomas to jump in. You know, we realize that, and this is one of the hardest areas, that we're collecting data and the types that we haven't collected before, through chats, through other engagements where you're getting things like language or you're getting text. how are you going to employ things like natural language processing to get insights and deliver, again, to measuring that experience, but also identifying potential, maybe leapfrog opportunities of unmet need from our HCPs, from our customers. It's a big part of also too, when I was speaking about the foundation, was that sort of rethinking or rebuild of our foundation included the ability to capture those that were non-structured data, because we knew that as you open up that engagement sources, that you're going to start to capture more. And so this is absolutely part of the thing, and I think important for any model moving forward.
And if I can add to that, I think to me, it's where that crux of customer experience, where you're really trying to understand the attitude and beliefs of an individual, it's in that land where most of that sits, right? So it's being able to interpret, from that, third party organizational data or social data mechanism to say, how are people thinking about me and my products? What are, is what I'm doing actually changing people's belief around who we are and what our products can do? If you ask them, they'll give you a very clinical answer typically, but if it's done through the way that they're talking about it on a social chat platform, sitting somewhere on a Medscape or a WebMD or something to that extent, it's quite interesting to see what they're actually saying versus what they tell you. So it's being, to Aaron's point, it's measuring against that to say, clearly this is what they're telling me. This is the reality, what they're telling everybody else. So that is actually where the crux of experience actually is happening. And understanding where they're lined up, and more importantly, where they're not. And being able to action orient against that so that you can make continued progress in your experiences.
And my thoughts on this is, first of all, what's non-traditional these days, but what I would clearly recommend every organization to look at, every commercial excellence organization, is what data do you want to own, what data do you want to continue to buy, and what data do you might want to share with partners. Personally, I believe we need to own much more, like our engagement data, for example. We can't just continue buying share of voice. There are certain things we simply need to own because they're becoming core to our engagement. And there are certain things we still need and want to buy because they're not. And then there's possibly data that we want to share with partners because we also gain some. So sharing ideas and data sources might be beneficial to both. Social is clearly an element where we need to pay more attention. Super difficult, also with the compliance in mind. But that is a channel we need to pay more attention to, if that's non-traditional.
Oh, very good. Follow on to that. So, by the way, what you're saying basically, you need to turn the unstructured data into structured data and build an ecosystem that can digest that, right? And I really like Thomas's view, and also looking not just what I consume, but what I put outside in order to share with partners to gain more capabilities and insight. Really good. Jeff, I know you have experience with this next question related to this. Qualitative, how do you add qualitative categories to analytics? And what do you have examples on what qualitative insights you share? Probably customer experience is a key point for you, right?
Absolutely. I think there's, when you start down this path of going after customer experience management, and it is imperative that you look at both sides of the coin, kind of what I would call the quantitative and the qualitative aspects of it. And when you think about qualitative, I mentioned this before, you could go down a path of like a fairly generic NPS type route, and you try and go out and do surveys to really understand, what your customers are doing. But the modern thinking around qualitative now is collectively, what are the various ways that you can bring together insight in a qualitative fashion? You've got your surveys on your websites, you've got your call centers, you've got your, any sort of engagement that you create. There's always the follow-up survey. There's that kind of qualitative aspects, but that's what I would call the granted, surveys where people want to provide you information. Then you actually have the alternatives, which is getting those other equivalent qualitative elements from the post-Congress surveys from third parties. And there's different ways you can start to collectively pull together around an activity what qualitative elements shifted during a period of time. And that's the stuff that absolutely has to be number one in especially when major events like Congresses and things like that that has to be one of your main drivers of focus as a leader on it. Literally nowadays, on a day-to-day basis, you can get that type of understanding about your, about how people are thinking about you. We run, Congress level stats dashboards, real time about what's going on in social, what's going on in share of voice, what's going on in, engagement standards. And that's the stuff, that's the qualitative pieces that are really telling us, are we making a difference right then and there? But the key thing is have somebody looking at that, analyzing it as it's happening, and react to it quickly. So if we need to make a shift at a Congress the next day, we can.
So qualitative for you is not just an add-on, it's at the core actually of what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I can add on to that, Jeff, the point of Congress is because, from pre-COVID, at least for us, Congresses were super important, very expensive, all that, and there were islands, right? You went there, you went away, and not really sure what happened. That has become digitalized. So I think that is a channel that we are certainly pushing for a revolution, hopefully with partners, and making it an integral part of the ecosystems and journeys for a lot of good reasons. To be more inclusive, to reach more, but also, of course, to capture more data, get more insights, and provide a better experience for the many. So good point on that, and really important.
Very good, thank you. Thomas, if I can stay with you, is now let's say you have the metrics, you have the data, the engine. How do you actually optimize the engagement using data on content, on channel, on sequence? How do you then really orchestrate and execute toward an individual customer level?
So in a perfect world, we would need to deploy stronger AI, simply because the human effort on doing that and analyzing through all that data, that's going to be tough. But I've seen it. It's possible in smaller segments of data. When you have good collection, structured data, you can actually use AI technologies to come up with those recommendations. Are we there yet? No, to be quite honest. But we're looking into it, and I have a firm belief that it can be done. You need to have strong platforms. So you need to get your data straight, your metrics straight, your rules straight, to be able to aggregate enough volumes to come up with those recommendations. So that's where we're heading towards. And there's a lot of ifs and buts, and it's tough, but it's absolutely doable. So again, the point is not to just collect a lot of data and say, oh, now we can see all that. The point is to move beyond that, of course, and figure out, okay, what do we then do quickly? And of course, if it needs to be at a rep orchestrated level, because I still believe there's a role here, important role, it can't be a huge dashboard that takes you forever to digest. It needs to be simple, right? But if it's a business analyst or a commercial excellence function, they need to work differently and serve up different services to the organization than they're doing today. That I'm also quite convinced of. Utilizing a much broader arsenal of data and tools to do so. I hope that was an answer to the question.
Oh, so I see Aaron smiling. Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Thomas is saying. This is an area that's rich. I don't think there's anyone who's mastered this aspect, but to Thomas's point, you need to leverage AI in this space. And then you also, to his point, need to have that right technology stack. What I'll add to it too is, on that journey, because again, I don't think that it's been mastered yet, but on that journey, an important aspect is linking it also to that brand strategy and that journey of what you develop, because you're orchestrating an experience, and it's not just a random experience, it's to what end. And so I take, when trying to deploy this, we think about the brand and the brand strategy and make it up. Let's say it's a brand that has a niche role. Okay, well, you want to help the HCP identify who those right patients are. Okay, you want to help the HCP get those patients to the right dose, so to sustainable, to that care level. You want to have them support their patients. So how are you then taking them along that journey so that they know how to do each to the optimal extent? And I think that is that aspect of leveraging AI mechanically, but then building it around this kind of framework and with your technology stack to get there. So I agree with those points. I think it's excellent. But core is that strategy of the brand.
Yeah, so automation seems to be a critical factor, right? We talk about platforms, but it's not just new software. It's actually software that allows, Thomas mentioned AI, that you cannot do this manually the way that we operate many ways today. Now, to tie that into a question from the audience, so how are sales, marketings, and maybe even the operation teams, how are they equipped to operate in a world where things are increasingly automated? Or how do we enable them to work there? Do you see that as a challenge? Do you see some solutions there already? Do you see some shifts?
I'm happy to jump on this one first. So the simple answer is they're not ready. I think everybody is struggling with this very, very, very significant point. Because once you do generate all that data, once you do get the automation in place, once you do actually start to consolidate the understanding that you have, the first thing you start to realize is this is more than I can control, right? And so people have tendency to sit there and say, okay, how do I prioritize? How do I start to think about, where the biggest bang for the buck, where as a former employee once said, is the juice worth the squeeze to go after, in this space. And I think it's important to really sit back and think about it. How do you do that? So, but you have to think about it not after it's done, not after you've done all that automation and set those algorithms. You have to think about that beforehand, because you have to know what you're going to drive an action versus just, basically dump a bunch of stuff and output or insight onto somebody and then figure out what to do from there. You got to try and go after something and follow through with it. So that design of, hypothesis testing, I guess is a good way to put it, experimentation, it's got to be done before you start the data analysis, way up front. And this is where the organization is not quite there. We still got to, I personally believe there's still a lot of integration work, like I mentioned earlier, that's needed between those individuals that are in the data science areas, the folks who can really take that data and make something out of it, but really help them become more educated on to Aaron's point, on the goals of the business, and then use the data to try and commonly go after a problem. That's what we need to do, versus the way we've always been running things. Let insight tell us what to do, go, and then we go from there. It has to shift. It has to get more forward, and the organization's not set up yet for that.
Your reaction time is going to be too slow as well. If you just do things and then wait till somebody picks out some nuggets within the data, and then you decide. Exactly. So you have to basically ask questions, plan a response based on the answer, and then when the answer comes, you can deploy it right away, right? It's a very different way of working than what we do today. Sorry, Thomas, I thought you wanted to add something to that.
No, and I was sitting here thinking, if I'm in a company or new to this, or not really that far, and listening to the three of us, I would go like, maybe, oh man, I don't even know where to start. There's so much I need to do. So how can we help them? And again, first of all, hire people from outside, right? This is here in pharma. We said, oh, it's difficult, it's hard, we haven't done it before. Well, others have. So start hiring them in. And yes, they probably don't know much about pharma marketing and needs to be learn that, but they have lots to add on other aspects of marketing automation, for example. It's not that hard. What is hard is to, of course, integrate it into the classical marketing disciplines and then educate and work with marketeers to actually read the insights from the data and quickly transform that into strategic tweaks or new tactical plans. We are used to working in a cycle, right? Cycles. I mean, who else does that, right? So just one example. So hire from the outside, get some fresh blood in, and then combine the competencies and make some agile teams. Involve IT, the best of them, and work on those solutions.
Very good. Practical tips are much appreciated. And, even at an individual level, during the pandemic or when things start to open up, I spoke to a few sales rep friends of mine, worried about their jobs, obviously. And I said, you want to be the rep coming back who can handle face-to-face, remote, do emails. You want to present yourself as the individual that can work in this new environment. And the same holds true for marketers in this shift. That's maybe a little bit slower, but still coming. You want to be the marketer who can operate in an automated environment, that can work based on data, that can proactively ask questions and and be ready for those responses, as you said. And it's as people will be hired from the inside, the people on the inside will be chosen as well to be leading organizations and brands that can operate in this new environment better than the traditional one. So I think it has a direct impact on each individual's career planning and strategy. So very important. Aaron.
I agree with you. I was going to say, I agree with your point there, Mark. One of the things that that we see and sort of hear and fundamentally believe is it's not necessarily the rep that succeeded in the past is going to be the ones who succeed in this future state, that it's going to take this mix of sort of thinking in different hybrid types of engagements. It's some of this, some of that. It's going to be assessing and using the tools and capabilities like AI suggested actions and incorporating that into the engagement, that it evolves the type of success. There is a role, and then for that rep, where they want to be is on that edge, but it's not necessarily all the skills it took you to get there. It's going to be building and evolving upon those skills.
To add on to that, there's an audience question around, will the reps be, or do you actually see reps being evaluated differently already? Because reach and frequency still has been a very simple metric to see if the reps actually going out doing their job. You know, so do you already see a shift in how reps quality maybe is being evaluated rather than reach and frequency, or is that, oh, you're nodding, Aaron, go ahead, please.
I mean, it's everything is new. It's going into these changes, but you know, deliberately, as you look at customer engagement, you're seeking something like the reps to be more taking their customers through a journey, again, through your whole ecosystem, not just with them as the focal and only point. So they are being looked at and assessed in a sense on how are they triaging to other parts of the ecosystem? How are they introducing self-service as a capability so that they are not just the only point? Now that's a mind shift. Everyone loves to have a customer dependent only upon them. But this is part of an evolution that I think will be further and further across the industry.
They're becoming orchestrators, right? And I still remember from my time in the US when I was out there, the good reps were the orchestrators, by the way. It was just, you know, phone calls and, you know, whatever, personal written note, it's orchestrators. And now they're having a better toolbox in doing so. Oh, of course, you need to be able to use tools. That kind of goes without saying.
Oh, very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, yeah, 100% agree, but I think at the same time, there's also an element of, you know, we are starting to see how they're being measured and how they're adding on to reach and frequency at the moment, how they're starting to be asked to do some of that orchestration that Thomas was just describing. And in doing that, it's senior leaders are asking that question, which is, you know, are you actually moving people through those stages? Are you feeling a difference in that conversation? Or, you know, we're asking more and more of our field agents to apply personalized digital activities directly to the customers, whether through email or text or whatever the case may be. So as that's expanding, it's imperative that you start to capture, you know, are those combination, to Aaron's point, of integrated channels working such that at the end of the day, the goal is to get a better understanding of that physician and where they sit in relation to their patients, so that you can ensure that what you're providing to them adds value to that portfolio of patients. And the only way to do that is to personalize every engagement. It's so hard to just historically peanut butter everything across evenly, you know, like we used to do. Now you really got to get targeted, and to do that, you got to start measuring for that.
Fantastic. We're coming up toward the end of our panel. There's so many more questions out here. I encourage the audience to connect, use the networking tool in the platform to ask specific questions to Aaron and Thomas and Jeff. So I want to thank you so much. This is a really critical topic. For me personally, I want to focus a lot of my time strategically on this and that shift, what it means for Indegene and our clients, and really appreciate the insight what you've been sharing with us. Thank you again. Please enjoy the rest of the conference, and some of you are going to see in some later sessions today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.